Welcome to OOTO, the Out of the Office Investigation. I'm Ben, and joining me is Anya.
Hello, Ben.
Today we are conducting an investigation into something truly fascinating. It's about a radical shift in governance, almost like a community's immune response to an existential threat.
That's a great way to put it.
We're looking at the Bahia de la Ventana region of Baja California Sur, where, back in 2026, the era of the Wild West definitively ended. And what has replaced it is a meticulously designed architecture of compliance and really of stewardship.
And it's not an exaggeration to say that, Anya. I mean, this quote from a 2026 briefing really sets the stage. The very soul of this place, its entire essence, was on the line. This wasn't just about new rules. It was a fight for survival.
Exactly. So here's the roadmap for our investigation today. First, we'll look at the legacy that was under threat. Then we'll get into the sovereign foundation of the ejidos. That's the key. After that, the new regulatory architecture. Then how the community makes it all work with their stewardship mandate. We'll cover the serious enforcement, the price of admission, so to speak, and finally, we'll look at what this all means for the future of paradise. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. To really understand what's happening now, you have to grasp what was at stake. This isn't just about a pretty beach. It's about defending a cultural inheritance thousands of years old from a very, very modern threat.
And Anya, this concept they call the trust inheritance it's profound. We are talking about a direct cultural and knowledge lineage from the ancient Paracoot people. I mean, these people were literally built by the sea. The archaeological evidence is incredible. They had these unique hyperdolitocephalic skulls, which means they were really long and narrow, a distinct genetic marker. And even more amazing, many of them had auditory exostoses, bony growths in their ear canals. It's a physical adaptation you see in people who spent a ton of time diving in cold, deep water. These were elite mariners, and that deep knowledge is the inheritance that today's local families are trying to protect.
That's right, Ben, and that sacred trust was being directly assaulted by what's called the shadow economy. We're talking about unpermitted foreign service providers. And look at the damage they were doing. It degrades the local culture by pushing out Mexican workers. It seriously endangers public safety, operating without any of the required safety certifications or insurance. It damages the fragile environment by just ignoring conservation rules. And, maybe worst of all for the people trying to do things right, it creates brutally unfair competition by skipping out on all the taxes and social security payments that legal businesses have to pay.
And that resentment, Ben, that sense of unfairness, it became the fuel for a huge change. It activated the region's oldest and most powerful legal institution, the ejido. Now, for those who might not know, an ejido is not just some local council. It's a form of communally owned land with sovereign powers granted by the Mexican Constitution itself.
You got it, Anya. And this flowchart shows the genius of how it works. It all stems from Article 27 of the Constitution. That's the source of their power. The community, through the Ejido Assembly, votes to create their own rulebook, the Reglamento Interno. But here's the brilliant part. Step 3. They register that rulebook with a federal agency, the National Agrarian Registry, or RAN. And once that happens, boom, their local community rules become legally binding federal mandates. It's a permanent shield that allows them to control their own destiny on their own land with the full backing of the federal government.
And this table really shows how they're using that power. This is that community immune response we talked about. They've clearly defined what's a predatory cut-and-run model versus the symbiotic standards they now demand. So instead of a developer coming in and draining the aquifer for a golf course, they mandate 100% water self-sustainability and gray water reclamation. Instead of developers abandoning a project halfway through, they now require a mandatory 10-year resource management bond held in escrow. It's an absolute game changer, rejecting the kind of exploitative development that has destroyed so many other beautiful places. You're listening to OOTO with research by El Campesino.
So, the ejidos have laid down the law from the ground up. Now let's look at the new regulatory architecture, this multi-layered system of compliance that's been built on top of that foundation. This isn't just one or two new rules. It's a complete, interlocking web designed to leave no room for the shadow economy to operate.
Anya, this matrix is really the core of the new system. See, before 2026, all these different government agencies, the port captain, tax authorities, immigration, they often operated in silos. Not anymore. Now, they are all networked. Data is cross-referenced. So for wind sports, civil protection can check the safety plan, but they can also instantly ping immigration, the INM, to verify the instructor's work authorization. A tourist visa is no longer enough to work on the beach. It's a digital dragnet, and it's designed to be inescapable.
And the system is smart enough to focus on the biggest problems first. The risk level isn't uniform. The most visible, illegal activities, like unpermitted sports instruction, are now considered a critical risk. An illegal instructor is basically a sitting duck for an inspection that will have immediate and severe consequences. Pop-up kitchens, they're now a higher risk, prime targets for labor and tax audits. But look at home services. The risk has been shifted directly onto the property owners. If you hire an unpermitted worker and they get hurt on your property, you are now personally and totally liable. We're talking about the potential to lose your home.
Ben, what's so fascinating is the psychology behind these labor reforms. It's not just about enforcement, it's about protecting the social fabric of the community. Take the 90-10 national labor ratio, for example. That mandates that 90% of any company's employees must be Mexican nationals. This is a direct measure to prevent the displacement of local workers. Combine that with a mandatory 40-hour work week and the federal tax authority, SAT, using AI to audit payments, well, it's all designed to restore a sense of fairness and stability.
And they're just as rigorous when it comes to the environment. The 2026 Orca Management Plan is a perfect example of this new mindset. It's incredibly strict. There's a hard cap of only 50 permits for the entire season. A maximum of 16 boats are allowed near the animals at any one time to reduce acoustic smog. Every single permitted boat must have GPS tracking, and they're required to practice engine-neutral observation, meaning you cut the engine and let the animals approach you. It's a preventative health strategy for the entire marine ecosystem, and it's non-negotiable.
So we have the foundational law from the ejidos and the specific regulations from the government. But you know, Ben, rules on paper are one thing. Making them work in the real world, on the water, that's something else entirely. And that's where stewardship, the community mandate, comes in. This is the real soul of the system.
Right. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? You've got miles of coastline, hundreds of boats, kite surfers, windsurfers. How could a handful of officials possibly police all of that? Well, the answer is, they don't have to. The community does it themselves.
Exactly, Ben. This is the Regional Maritime Safety Council, the CRSM, and it's a model of co-responsibility. Look at who's involved. The ejidos provide the legal oversight. The local fishing cooperatives, they are the literal eyes on the water, acting as first responders. The sporting associations manage safety protocols and logbooks. The government only steps in for validated high-level emergencies. And that Lucero Giraldo network provides the biological data to make sure the environmental rules are being followed. It's an incredibly efficient system that saves a massive amount of federal resources. You're listening to OOTTO with research by Al Campesino.
And they have these really smart, practical protocols in place. The 30-60 rule is a perfect example. Every single person going out on the water files an ETA, an estimated time of arrival. If you're 30 minutes late, your onshore contact has to start trying to reach you. If you're 60 minutes overdue, the community search protocol is automatically triggered. This was created because of a massive, costly false alarm caused by a negligent sailor in February of 2016. This rule prevents that from ever happening again and handles incidents at the lowest possible level.
And this is where the human element just comes alive. The Agua Amarga model isn't a rule, it's a mindset. It's described as a mental migration, a shift away from simple commercial extraction toward high-value conservation. And it's being pioneered by these incredible local families, the Luceros, the Giraldos, the Greens. They're the ones blending that ancient, multi-millennial maritime knowledge with a modern conservation ethic. They're setting the gold standard for how to interact with marine world ethically and sustainably. They are the living embodiment of that trust inheritance.
But Anya, as inspiring as that community stewardship is, there has to be a flip side. A system this tight doesn't work on good intentions alone. For those who choose not to play by the rules, there have to be consequences. And in this new model, those consequences are swift, severe, and absolutely certain. This is the price of admission.
Oh, absolutely. The entire philosophy has shifted. The old days of wink and a nod enforcement are completely over. The new doctrine is active enforcement and zero tolerance. The message couldn't be clearer. Compliance is not optional. You follow the rules or you are out. It's really that simple.
And this lays out the consequences in stark detail. And notice how interconnected they are. If you're caught giving unpermitted sports instruction, the primary consequence isn't a fine. It's immediate administrative detention and deportation, followed by a multi-year ban from re-entering Mexico. If you're managing property illegally, you're not only facing massive tax fines and liens on the property, but your passport gets flagged internationally. And no matter the violation, it results in permanent exclusion from all ejido lands and your name being entered into a public registry of identified offenders.
There's also an anonymous reporting portal, so everyone is watching. There is nowhere to hide. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, the OOTO power, the interlocking regulations, the community stewardship, the harsh enforcement, what you see is a community making a very conscious, very deliberate choice about its future. This wasn't an accident, it was a design.
And Ben, it really boils down to the two potential futures shown here. On the left, you have the all-too-common story, the generic, degraded destination. Unregulated growth, loss of local culture, environmental ruin, and social friction. We've all seen it happen. On the right is the vision they're fighting for, a sovereign cultural sanctuary. Slow, controlled growth that preserves the OOTO heritage, protects the ecological integrity, and builds a symbiotic economy. The argument here is that the stringent, sometimes tough regulatory system is the necessary price of admission to achieve that future on the right.
And that really leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? In a world that seems obsessed with endless, rapid growth, is this kind of ultra-regulated, slow-growth model the only viable path to protect a unique culture and a fragile ecosystem from being completely erased? It's a powerful question to consider. It certainly is. The era of the Lejano Oeste, the Wild West in Baja California Sur, has ended. The community has made its choice. This was OOTO, the Out of the Office Investigation. Thank you for listening.